from 1603 through 1867, Japan was divided into more than 60 small countries. And it is the major cause of Japan's subcultural diversity. And because of a rank system, caste system in Edo era, Japan has been struggling with social integration issues for human rights still now. This is, so to speak, prejudice between Japanese and Japanese. Very, very negative aspects of Japanese society. And second topic is ethnic and cultural diversity. Japan has Ainus, the indigenous people. Also, Japan has Okinawan issues. Political or social inequalities have not been solved yet. Next slide is Koreans living in Japan. In 1910, Japan invaded and annexed Korea, and after that, Koreans became targets of ethnic prejudice. It's a very serious aspect of Japanese society. Hate crimes. That's something about historical background and demographics of Japan. Japan is culturally and ethnically diverse, and so multicultural education is needed in Japan. Second section is multicultural education as a kind of citizenship education. Dr. Nakajima insists the importance to correct mainstream or majority people's mind. I know it is the major goal of multicultural education. Third section is Japan's challenging tomorrow. First topic is teaching social justice, equity embodied. And second one is the transition of Banks' theory. I have analyzed Dr. James Banks' theories, and in 1995, he published one article with his wife, Cherry, and its title is Equity Pedagogy. I read it carefully and interpreted that he thinks the major goal of multicultural education is equity pedagogy. Japanese people can understand equality, which is treating persons samely. However, we do not know how to meet different needs or treating different persons differently to make them similar. So I put an importance on equity pedagogy as a major goal of multicultural education in Japan. That's one of Japan's challenges tomorrow. Fourth section is equity pedagogy. First topic is a revision of Japanese course of study curriculum. Greater importance on equity at high school level, 2009 and 2018 revisions. I will go to the second topic. Two issues in multicultural education. The first issue is how to build school culture equitable. This has been discussed everywhere in the world for a long time, and in Japan also, we educators have discussed it. Second issue is how to make students understand equity. Very few educators and researchers are focusing upon this issue, partly because this is related to curriculum or contents of certain subjects, and partly because what is equity must be clarified. Both are difficult tasks for us. However, this is very important issue in equity pedagogy. Okay. Fifth section is web application for understanding equity. The most important problem with equity pedagogy is that equity is highly qualitative and it cannot be defined precisely. This fact causes confusion and raises a serious question. Can we teach something that cannot be defined? There is possibly only one way to make students use their experiences. We spend our lives nurturing lots of social relationships. In doing so, our equity mind is being fostered, and it is always used in decision-making processes unconsciously. Based on these research themes, I developed a web application named Let's Create TV News for elementary kids, which was then provided to many school teachers for use in their classroom teaching. These are screenshots of the web application. Students may choose 3 video clips from 9 on their ICT peripherals, and they usually struggle to make their TV news equitable and fair. 9 movie clips has these contents. First three are news titles. Number 4 has an interview with mayor. Number 5 is interview with consultant. Number 6 is a group of conservation of nature. Number 7, citizens group. Number 8, a woman with her little son. Number 9, a male resident. The most important feature of this application is that students are forced to continuously think. This application can be used for the graduate school level or for in-service teacher training programs. Each student always creates different news, different combination of news clips if they try to make their news neutral or equitable. Students say, cannot make the only one news, cannot find a correct answer, feeling blurred in the head, etc. Again, the most important problem with equity pedagogy is that equity is highly qualitative and it cannot be defined precisely. So my findings is here. Students and teachers can understand that there are many different ways of thinking if we have same purposes. A brief conclusion I have. Students' views of equity and fairness are being fostered in their daily lives, in social relationships. Teachers should make students to use their views in the classrooms. Teachers should create teaching materials for such purposes. Okay, this is my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I think we're going to take both presentations first, and then we'll have questions and discussion, if that's okay. So if Jeongmin is ready to, yes, to do her presentation. I can see the slides shared there. And Jeongmin is from the Asia Pacific Center for Education and International Understanding, based in Seoul. And you're going to introduce trends in global citizenship education and orientation at APCEIU, I believe. So please go ahead. I think you need to put your slides on presentation mode if you can. Oh, I think you're still muted. You're still muted.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right. So can you see my slide? All right.
Yes, if you can put them on presentation mode, then we'll see them sort of better. They'll be larger on the screen.
I think I did. I did put it in presentation mode. I don't know how to make it larger though.
Yeah, I can't help with that because I'm afraid all the instructions are in Korean.
Okay, let me see. Maybe I will just ask my colleague to share.
I think you can start, and if you have a colleague there who can come and tell you which button to press, I mean, in the meantime, that's fine.
All right. Okay. Let me just. Today, I am going to share. I'm going to discuss global citizenship education, shortened as GCET, from the point of perspective of UNESCO, because there are many different ways to discuss global citizenship education. And so I'm going to discuss it from the perspective of UNESCO on the one hand, and on the other hand, in terms of challenges and possibilities in changing landscape of world and of education, particularly through APCEIU's orientations and approaches manifested in our programs and activities. I have too many slides, so I will just probably jump from one another very quickly. So as I said, today I'm going to discuss global citizenship education as a global agenda. But I'm not really sure how many of the participants are familiar with global citizenship education as a global agenda. So I will try to give an overview very quickly, and then move to some of the questions we are struggling with at our center. First, the global citizenship education. Now we call it as global citizenship education, but it has a lot of different names in the past. Just to remind you that global citizenship education has historical development and historical trajectory, particularly as a global agenda through UN and UNESCO. So you might, some of you might know the famous preamble of UNESCO, which says, since wars begin in the minds of humans, it is in the minds of humans that the defenses of peace must be constructed. So global citizenship education, from the beginning, at the very beginning of the UNESCO's, it's kind of a founding idea that which is a peace education for peace. But as we experience different kinds of historical events, like poverty, polarization, and human rights violation, and all those historical events or conditions, and as well as widening kind of a public consciousness over different issues. So the very concept of peace has changed from absence of wars to the absence of structural violence, even to the building of a culture of peace. So that's how it has developed in such a way that it incorporates a set of relevant and related initiatives such as human rights education, peace education, education for international understanding, intercultural education, and education for sustainable development. So that's why to some people, global citizenship education is still quite confusing because it's very comprehensive, because it really has this historical baggage in there. But at the same time, I mean, from the very practical point of view, it's also enabling factor that it has all those aspects. So, you know, we often see at the very level of program or activity implementation, we can actually consolidate different resources from human rights education, education for gender equity, or even you know, sustainable development and all those areas. So this is both enabling factors, which could be confusing to the eyes of kind of outside of this circle. I'm still wondering if my slide is still showing or not, because I probably
we can see your slides aren't moving at all, so we can see your first slide, but we can't see anything else.
Okay. All right. Can I just drop it and?
You can do without slides if you want.
Yeah. Well, it's such a pity that, you know, I put a lot of. Oh, okay. Now, yeah.
Okay.
Because my colleague has a slide and she knows how to do it. Sorry.
That's it. Which is in fact different from the slides we could see before, but that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Great.
Yeah. Maggie, please go. Can you go to the probably I don't know how many yeah, later ones. Slide number probably 10. We can stop at 6. So when we say global citizenship education as a global agenda, particularly you might be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals of 4.7. And next, please, and next. And the way the next and 2 slides back. Slide 8. Yeah, here. So global citizenship as a normative framework of UNESCO. You cannot really give a one sentence kind of very clear cut definition, but instead, you know, you can probably you can talk about its goals and you know, what it does. So it refers to a sense of belonging to the broader community and common humanity, and it emphasizes interconnections and interdependency. So the learners are supposed to are expected to understand interconnection and interdependency of between not only global and local, but also, you know, in our aspects of lives. And it is supposed to be transformative and knowledge, skills, and values and attitudes that contribute to a more inclusive and just peaceful world. And as I mentioned before, it is a multifaceted approach, incorporating many different education initiatives. And it is from the perspective of lifelong learning, although at the moment it is very, I mean, UNESCO project is very focused on formal education. I think we can move to the slide, slide 9, the next slide, please. Yeah. I will introduce this topics and learning objectives of published by UNESCO in 2015. Some of you might be familiar with this publication, but it really gives you a very concrete ideas about, you know, what global citizenship education are trying to instill. Next, please. But at the same time, I would say that global citizenship education is valuable, not just as a kind of new trends, but it's more like reclaiming the very goal of education. Some of you might be familiar with this Article 26. It's probably because of the first clause, which says everyone has the right to education. You can probably imagine it's can you click it, please, Maggie? Yeah, it's from Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed in 2048, and which says as a human right, education as a human rights should be directed to full development of human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It should promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and share further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace, meaning that global citizenship education can be seen as a response to the current globalization and other aspects, but at the same time, its fundamental values really lie in the very ultimate purpose of education. So it's next, please. So I would say that we should really see the kind of intersection between our the general goals of education and global citizenship education. Next, please. And global GCET also has kind of a diverse and also common kind of emphasis by different stakeholders and contexts. Nowadays, it's kind of a very well used. Widespread in various kind of projects and documents, and even PISA, OECD might just kind of develop their own set of surveys for global competence. 21st, some people call it 21st century skills, some transversal skills, and I think for me. When it comes to the content and values, the closest among this to the very UNESCO UNESCO notion of GCET is probably competencies for democratic culture by Council of Europe. But also, you are seeing if you pay attention to Asian countries, then even Southeast Asian countries have been developing the ways to monitor global citizenship competence, which was launched by the CPRM actually last year. I think it was December last year. Also, we have a number of different emphases on global citizenship education, but you also see common denominators here. So next, please. As you can see, now it's not only at the global level, but also regional level, like ASEAN curriculum source book or ASEAN countries are joining the global citizenship education, and also, as I mentioned, Council of Europe also set a kind of framework which is very close to global citizenship education. Next, please. But at the same time, you will see, you will also see some of the ideas in global citizenship education are acceptable, and some are not. Some are less acceptable in different societies, which kind of poses us kind of challenges. I will discuss later. Next, please. Because global citizenship education, it is a global agenda and it has kind of a normative framework. But at the same time, in order for it to be implemented in education setting, it should be made relevant to educators and society as well as learners. So the question of local contextualization is always a very key question. And here at APCEIU and UNESCO also believe that local contextualization is important. However, look, how do we do it without really kind of compromising a set of parameters and framework that is really core values of global citizenship education? I think democracy, Professor Porka just mentioned it in his opening that, democracy might be the one, the question like, how do you actually teach and learn democracy in very authoritarian kind of regime, kind of issue. But still, we do believe that local contextualization should be done as a strategy to find the entry points for each society. And it is also a way to decolonize global citizenship education. There's always some resistance from countries that global citizenship education is seen as kind of very Western philosophy. So this is a kind of constant process of negotiation and dialogue, between normative framework and local agendas and issues. I think I have only a couple of minutes left, right? So next, please. So I would, and last one before I move to my my organization's activities is that local contextualization does not happen only at the local context as it is, but also this time, like COVID-19 and this pandemic. What does it mean to global citizenship education? And what we see is that, we see all those challenges, but at the same time, we also see a lot of opportunities as well. So UNESCO is trying to, next please. So I think one of the urging issues has been, hatred, discrimination, racism, xenophobia, and all those problems, as well as this infodemic. And there's also, I think, growing awareness over climate change. So throughout this crisis, people have heightened awareness of all those issues and also show solidarity. And UNESCO is trying to create the initiatives and campaigns around this. Next, I think probably, maybe we can jump into slide 20. I said that the COVID-19 pandemic poses not only challenges but also opportunities, because I think we do have lots of very interesting projects going on. Because this is a great opportunities for educators to make the very content of global citizenship education very relevant to the kids. So we do have lots of very interesting projects going on. I think I can just explain further during the questions if the questions can come out. I think I am out of time, right? I have part that really introduce our APCEIU's activities, but if time's up, I can just leave it because I can share the PPT later for anybody who's interested. So can I have a couple of minutes or should I just stop here?
You could take maybe one more minute or so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. Maggie, please, can you go to page 20, slide 22. APCEIU is part of UNESCO, what we call the Category 2 Center, specialized for global citizenship education, formerly known as Education for International Understanding. We have various areas of work from advocacy to material development to capacity building, but our focus is very much on capacity building of educators, not only educators, but the professionals in education. We can move to slide 25. Yeah. we have many lines of activities, and which shows kind of trends and what we try to do. One is mainstreaming GCD into formal education, and some of you might be familiar with SDG 4.7.1. Is the monitoring indicators, and as a part of this effort, we are assisting some of the countries to develop, integrate global citizenship education into their own curriculum. We can move next, please. And our capacity building programs really, the workshops are wonderful, but it's one-off workshops. So we are moving toward really kind of building community of practice. So we encourage teachers to do their own research and develop their own materials. We are moving toward that kind of empowerment aspect as well. And the rest, can you go to 29, please? And what we've been doing in last year and this year is that we've developed a lot of materials addressing the issues around the pandemic. So the way we do it is that we would publish a very intellectual kind of a discussion, but we would ask teachers to really kind of observe ideas and turn it into the teaching material. So it's like content, kind of from content knowledge to pedagogical content knowledge. So pedagogical knowledge. So we've done this, and we also we have lots of online materials and courses. So can you move to the last one? Slide 34, and quickly from 34 to 36. You are encouraged to visit our online campus. There are lots of online materials available. So thanks. I think I should stop here, and I will just leave the stage opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much to both of the speakers. Now, I think the best thing would be to see if we have any questions or comments from everybody listening. If not, I have one or two questions that I can raise. So do we have any burning questions out there? We don't. Right. Okay. Well, I mean, thank you for two very interesting presentations. And I mean, both of these obviously relate to East Asia. And when we're talking about global citizenship education, or as Professor Kawasaki was discussing, issues of diversity internal to a particular society, in this case Japan, I think perhaps there are certain common patterns that we find across East Asian education systems to some extent, partly because of the history of a very sort of intensive focus of education systems in this region on development, the developmental state, meaning primarily economic development, and how that historically has been tied to a particular form of patriotic education and an ethos of self-sacrifice. So you construct a sort of homogeneous vision of a national self, and partly in order to persuade people of the virtue and necessity of committing themselves not simply to sort of individual betterment or the betterment of their family, but to the betterment of the nation as a whole, conceived as a sort of family. And that, I mean, this is something that a number of researchers looking at the history of education in this region have commented on. But I think it relates to a number of concrete issues in education systems in societies like Japan and Korea. For example, language education and history education. So when Professor Kawasaki was talking about Japan, he was talking about different dimensions of diversity in the Japanese population, the Ainu, Okinawa, ethnic Koreans, foreign populations or descendants of foreign immigrants. And all of those groups historically have different languages. Some of them don't survive, but historically Japan was a linguistically diverse society. And with respect to the foreign population, there are a number of languages spoken in Japan. What is the foreign language? What is the only language apart from Japanese that Japanese students get to study in school? English.
Yes, English. We start the English language learning from 7th graders in public schools. So we study English for about 6 years. So many foreign people think Japanese people can speak because we study English language for at least 3 years, and at the junior high school and senior high school we have 3 years course, and after that almost half of the students will go to the college level. So after entering the college, we must learn English more, and we have to learn another language. So
yes, but well, so one set of issues relates to the effectiveness of English education, and that maybe that's a set of issues we can leave to one side. But if we're interested in promoting international understanding or appreciation of diversity within a society like Japan itself, what are the most relevant languages to teach for that purpose? Probably not English. English has been emphasized here and in other education systems largely for instrumental reasons, because it's seen as important for technology transfer, because it's seen as the global language for all sorts of activities related to the economy, to trade, and so forth. And those are legitimate reasons for emphasizing the study of English. But if we want to foster a sort of appreciation for different cultures and for the cultures of minorities within our society, or for the cultures and histories of our closest neighbors in East Asia, is English the language that does that? Probably not. So we never, students here, I mean, what about Korean? What about Chinese languages?
For example, my school provide Spanish language course, Spanish language, Chinese, Korean, Russian, Italian.
Meaning your university?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
When I was a college student, I studied Chinese, and my hobby was listening to the foreign radio station. So I was always watching or listening to the Korean radio station. So I know some words of Korean language. But we Japanese, our students are putting too much focus on learning English, not other language. But for Japanese society, Asian languages are becoming important. For example, my niece went to the Osaka University, the School of Foreign Language, her major was Vietnamese language. She went to Vietnamese to study Vietnamese for 1 year, and she got the first prize at the Vietnamese language competition. So from this April, she got a job at the trading company using Vietnamese language to importing and transporting commodities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not so many students of mine studies French or Spanish. Yeah, that's it.
No, I mean, so yes, I mean, students in Japan, a few get the chance to study other languages, but usually only at university, not at school level. So language learning in Japan, at least, and I think this applies also to Korea, it's not really assigned that sort of integrative function within society, or it's not really seen as primarily as a tool for promoting international understanding, except in quite a narrow sort of instrumental sense. But sorry, so do you have any comments on that, Jeongmin?
I would say that it is very true. I mean, still English is a kind of the kind of mainstream foreign language. However, here in Korea, we have a growing public awareness that we live in Asia and we have more contact with Asian people. So that, in terms of population, we have a growing population, what we call multicultural family. I don't like the term, but here in Korea, we use the term. But we have really kind of a very faster growing kind of population, which really first, we used to have a policy that really tried to help them to adjust mainstream society. But now it's turning to the kind of a global citizenship education or international education, education for international understanding, which really try to equip all the members to the diversity. So, going back to your question of, this idea of language or even history, we also have, Korea has a slightly different kind of history from Japan, particularly in modern society. Modern Korea has gone through a number of very progressive democratization movement, and out of which also very nationalistic kind of idea has been challenged a lot. So now even we decide not to teach, under progressive, previous progressive government, they dropped the idea of teaching one single kind of textbook type kind of history, because the history can be also interpreted in different ways. And we dropped the what we call national language. We changed it to more like a kind of a Korean language instead of national language. So I think there's a growing awareness that in that aspect. And also English, we are aware that English is spoken by many different people, so that the accent could be different, so that it's no longer kind of Anglo-Saxon kind of language only. It's language shared by so many people. So we are very careful about the textbook images and all those even in English textbook.
That's a very interesting point about the way that you teach English. Yes, I mean, if you think it's a global language, why do all the textbooks only have to feature, Anglo-Saxon looking?
Right. We do have all different kinds of ethnicity in our English textbook now.
Yeah. 20 years ago, I was involved in writing textbooks, English textbooks in China, and I tried to slip in a whole unit about an Indian scientist visiting China. And then I found that the final version, the Indian scientist had been transformed into a British scientist called Mr. White, which was unfortunate, I felt. But that I think the editors felt that Chinese teachers weren't ready for the concept of, you know, English as an Indian language as opposed to an American or
Right.
British or Australian.
Yeah, and also I didn't have a chance to introduce one of our program, but we do have an international teacher exchange program where you know, teachers will, I mean, from Asian countries, they come to Korea, and you know, Korean teachers go to their countries, and you know, they have a limited English skills, and then they are forced to you know, they are encouraged to learn local language. And also, you know, there's a very interesting question in the chatting room. It says, you know, what about alternative nonverbal language? So I think probably what we see from this program is that spending you know, almost a semester in the foreign context, every day you have to interact with others, then you develop understanding that goes beyond you know, verbal language often. And especially because they are educators, they are teachers, they share so much in common that you know, their kind of understanding goes beyond kind of what verbal language can do. Yeah.
Thanks. That's great. And you pointed out that we do have a few questions in the chat. One other that's just come in is global citizenship education included in the Japanese and Korean school curriculum? Well, or is it an individual subject? Well, I can answer that. It's not an individual subject, but is it included in the school curriculum anywhere? This concept of global citizenship education, does it feature at all?
That's a very good question. I am a social studies textbook writer, and we just finished the inspection of the textbook by Japanese government. Our textbook has successfully passed the inspection, and Japanese high school curriculum, especially social studies curriculum, has just drastically changed. In civic education area, we will have new subject. Its name is public. We have contemporary society. But contemporary society will be changed, will be ended, and we will have new subject, public, from next year. And I wrote a contemporary society textbook and also a public textbook. We just finished the inspection for the public, and its content include the global citizenship education in small area, and as a social studies professor, I am expecting Japanese social studies teachers to teach something or use some contents to foster global citizenship in Japanese students. That's a current status of Japanese social studies education.
Yeah, here in Korea as well, I mean, definitely curriculum has a lot of elements of global citizenship education, and actually it is very sophisticated how it is incorporated in social studies. However, the question is, if we think that you know, the very goal of global citizenship education is not so much knowledge per se, but actually changes in attitude and behavior, and you know, action oriented, then the question is whether really curriculum integration really brings people's kind of, I mean, changes in people's actions. That's questionable, and that's really when, you know, you really need a very competent teachers who can translate curriculum elements or textbook elements into the real learning. So that's a kind of challenge.
Thank you. Yes. And I think with a concept like global citizenship education or education for international understanding or whatever it is, I think that the big challenge for teachers and curriculum developers is to tie that somehow to sort of concrete topics or themes that students can relate to, rather than sort of leaving it at the level of abstract concepts or ideas. There was a study that a friend of mine did some years ago comparing, can't remember which textbooks, sort of social studies textbooks in China and Japan, looking at, to what extent they dealt at all with the idea of Asian regionalism. So if you're talking about global citizenship education, do you leap immediately from the national to the global? Or, do you go sort of through an intermediate stage where you sort of try to encourage students to relate more to their closest neighbors, their regional neighbors? And here in East Asia, I think that idea of regional identity or using the curriculum to promote a regional identity is quite weak, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very difficult to actually, from historical kind of experience, it's really difficult. But I think excellent teachers, what they are able to do is really kind of encourage students to see identity being really multiple, and how to do the border crossing from their own experience. So, for instance, I think Professor Seiji brought this issue of Koreans in Japan. And interestingly, many Koreans are also racist within Korea. But then when it comes to the issue of Koreans in Japan, they will get upset. And probably very excellent teachers would really kind of link to those two and make encourage students to see, how experience can be perceived differently, and then kind of expand their identity beyond their immediate borders and their immediate community. And I think I came across a very interesting activities, classroom cases, the teachers can successfully do that. And it's very interesting. And going back to, I think there was a question about, the good practice, how the challenges were turned into the opportunities. I think that's what, when kids just read about anti-discrimination on the book, it's really abstract. But when it comes to COVID-19, it's daily life. And then they actually know a lot of cases even around themselves, the case of cases of discrimination. And teachers, good teachers would turn it into the career learning opportunities, so that they bring these daily cases of discrimination into their lessons on anti-discrimination education.